All right, so this part of the notes is going to basically walk you through 2 of the 5 shortcuts to proving triangles are congruent. So the first one is side, 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 which is abbreviated SSS. And it basically just says if 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. So I see that these 2 sides are congruent, so I can write down AB congruent to DE. Then I can see that these 2 sides are congruent, so BC congruent to EF. And then I can see that these 2 sides are congruent, so AC congruent to DF. If all 3 of those things happen, then triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So that's how side, side, side works. So you prove 3 sides are congruent to 3 sides, then the triangles are congruent. So let's actually look at a proof here. So on that cheat sheet that we just went over, it says the first thing we're going to do is list our given information. So my first piece of given information is PQ congruent to ST, and that was given. And I need to make sure I mark that on the picture itself. So over on our picture, we're going to put that PQ is congruent to ST. That was given. Okay, the next piece of given information here that we're going to write down is QR congruent to TR. So again, that is given to us. And we're going to mark that on the picture. So QR congruent to TR, that's given. All right, now the last thing is midpoint. So they went ahead and wrote that in. That again is just given information for us. So we know that that was given. So we need to think about what our next step is. We've listed all of our given information. And we're going to now think about step 2. So step 2 was vocabulary. Do we have any words in our given information? And yes, we do. We have this word midpoint in our given information. So what does midpoint do? All right, so midpoint cuts a segment in half. So if I look at that next line, it's trying to tell us that PR is congruent to SR. Well, how did we know that? Well, we knew that because of the definition of midpoint. So that next line is just definition of midpoint. Whenever you have a vocabulary word, you're going to use the definition of that word somewhere in our proof. Now when I look at the picture, I see that all 3 sides of triangle PQR is congruent to all 3 sides of triangle STR. We always end with what we're trying to prove, which they wrote in there. And the reason would be side, side, side. That's how we know they're congruent. All 3 sides of one is congruent to 3 sides of the other one. All right, let's look at the next proof. So again, we're going to start with that given information. So JL is congruent to MN, that's given. You've got K is the midpoint of JN and LM, that again is given. All right, that's all of our given information. We're going to go ahead and mark step 1. It said JL was congruent to MN. All right, so now we're supposed to look for vocabulary words. Do we see any vocabulary words in the given information? Yes, the word midpoint. So we just talked about midpoint means that it cuts something in half. So we've got that K cuts JN in half. So here is K. Here is JN, so it's telling you that this half is congruent to this half, and that is the next line. JK congruent to NK, that is because of the definition of midpoint. Okay, now we know that K is also the midpoint of LM. So what that's telling you is that LK is congruent to MK. Well, that again is definition of midpoint. All right, the last line is always what you're trying to prove. So triangle JKL is congruent to NKM. And how do we know that? Well, if I look at the picture, I have all 3 sides of one triangle marked congruent to all 3 sides of the other triangle. So that would be your side, side, side. So that is the side, side, side shortcut. The other shortcut we're going to talk about is side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. That means the angle is between the 2 sides. Looking at the picture, I have this side, I have this side, and I have the angle that connects those two sides. It is not this situation. This would be angle side side. Notice that this angle is not touching both of these sides, and we cannot cuss in geometry. So this one doesn't work. The angle has to actually touch both of the sides that we're using. So in this picture, if AB is congruent to DE, and angle B is congruent to angle E, and the final step, BC is congruent to EF, so the two sides and the angle that connects them or touches them. If all three of those pieces are congruent, then we know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So that would be side, angle, side. So let's go ahead and see how that one works. So looking at this next proof, we start with that given information. So JM is congruent to LN, that's given. We've got angle JMN is congruent to angle LNM, that is also given. We're going to put that in our picture. So JM congruent to LN, angle JMN, this angle, JMN, and angle LNN, this angle is congruent. All right, so are there any vocabulary words? Nope. All right, the next thing we're supposed to look for is reflexive. Do they share a side? Hopefully you said yes, because they share this side in the middle, so I'm going to mark it congruent. And notice that's the next line. MN congruent to NM, that is reflexive. We end with what we're trying to prove. And how are those congruent? Well, we've got our side, our angle, and our side. So side, angle, side. All right, last one. Again, start with your given information. So AB congruent to CB, given. BD bisects angle ABC, again, that's given. All right, we're going to mark our picture AB congruent to CB, perfect. Now, we're supposed to look for vocabulary words, and this does have a vocabulary word, bisect. Bisect is kind of like a midpoint, except for it deals with angles. So this is telling you that this side bisected that angle up there at the top. So their next line is ABD is congruent to CBD. Why? Because of the definition of bisect. Okay, the next line says BD congruent to BD. So how did you know that this side was going to be the same? Well, that's that next step in our proof cheat sheet. That's reflexive. We end with what we're trying to prove. And how are those two triangles congruent? Well, we've got our side, our angle, and our side. So that would be side, angle, side. So you have two different shortcuts that you can use today. Side, 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 which just means three sides and three sides. Or side, angle, side, which is the side, the angle, and the other side that the angle touches. So that's basically what we're covering today.